And we're live, Carol.
We are live. I want to welcome everybody online and live here with us in Dyer, Indiana. We're coming to you from the Vine Bookstore at Faith Church in Dyer. For those of you off-site who may not be familiar with our location, we are far northwest Indiana. We're literally on the state line of Illinois, and we're about 15 to 20 miles south of Chicago. So if any of you are weather buffs, you know that it's really, really cold here. So only the brave of heart are with us tonight. We have a lot of people that I think couldn't make it because of the cold, but we have the very finest from Chicago here with us tonight. So it's about 2 degrees below zero. Wind chills are 15 to 20 below. So, but we're warm and cozy in here, and we're excited about being with you guys tonight. So our hostess, our MC for this event will be Angie Breidenbach. She's president of CAN, which is the Christian Authors Network. She's joining us from Montana, where it's also cold and snowy, and when she switches to her view, you can see her backyard, which is beautiful. A gorgeous view of a snowy, mountainy countryside. She has done a tremendous amount of work to organize this event, and we're very thankful for her and for her passion. Yes, for her passion for connecting authors and readers. We're also thankful for all of the authors that agreed to participate. They have graciously all signed and sent us book plates for the Lassoed by Marriage book. And they've also sent a beautiful assortment of gifts for a giveaway. So our people here will be able to sign up every week to put their name in a drawing. And at the end of the event, which is in March, they'll get to, somebody will win a great prize. It's beautiful. Just a couple of reminders for our on-site participants. Please be sure to get your book plate for this week. And don't forget to enter your name in the drawing. And for all of our guests online and off-site, we hope that you enjoy reading each novella every week. And we ask you that you have questions ready for our authors because they're really excited to interact with you as well. So Angie's going to give you a little more of the techie advice about how to do that. But that brings us to one last reminder. That we are dealing with a lot of technology from Chicago, Montana, and Texas. So never know what kind of difficulties we're going to run into, but please bear with us and we'll try to correct these issues as we go along. And we're giving a special thank you to our technical expert, David Lopez.
Yay!
He hooked us all up and made this possible. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Angie, who's going to give us a few more brief instructions, and she's going to introduce our author for tonight, Angela Bell. Thanks, Angie. It's all yours.
Thank you. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to put it on me. It is so nice to be with you all, and I'm excited to introduce you to my new friend and sister author, Angela Bell. She has written the novella, The Substitute Bride, which I just finished reading myself. She has a lot of fun facts about automatons and some of the interesting things that are in here with her characters. And she is a Victorian lady who lives today. So when she's writing her stories, she feels them deeply from the heart. And she has a lot of fun showing you the essence of what a Victorian lady is about, not only in her characters, but in the way that she lives. So you'll get to see some of her fun stuff, and I'm going to have her show you her teacup tonight, and then she's going to give us a little presentation about her story, and then you'll have the opportunity to do a question and answer time and just enjoy your time with Angela Bell. And I'll be back to give you the link for next week, and then each week for 9 weeks, I'll give you a new link because this video is being recorded. If you are watching the recording and you weren't able to get into the live event, I'll bet you there was one thing that caused it. And it's right up here in the top corner of the video on the event page, and it's the yellow live button. So if for any reason you're trying to get into event and the event only shows a photo on the screen, don't forget to click that little yellow live button. And I'm hoping that you're seeing this the way I'm seeing it. But it's up in your, when you're looking at your screen, it's in the top right corner by the Q&A. And if you're online with us, you're also able to ask questions. You can send us questions, and you can write a little comment in the chat box. And as long as everything is handled kindly and with graciousness, we will have a wonderful time. Anyone who acts in any way that would use foul language or be offensive or anything like that, we're going to let you know that we will eject you from the event. And that is to make it a safe environment for all the participants that are here. So with that, remember, we'll have another link at the end of the event so that you can be with us next week. I would like to introduce you to the adorable and wonderful Victorian lady, Angela Bell. And Angela, you are now presenting. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Bell, and I'm the author of The Substitute Bride in the Lassoed by Marriage romance collection. I'm the oddball of the group because mine is the only one that is set across the pond in England. So I do things a little bit differently. I like to wear hats, and I love to drink tea. Tonight I'm drinking from a Lady Carlisle teacup because the heroine in my novella marries Lord Elliot Carlisle. And
hold on one second. Angie,
yes.
Can you switch Angela to the main screen?
Is she not on the main screen?
No, she's not.
Whoop.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Hi.
Thank you.
Oh, I clicked present and it didn't do it. I should have clicked again. So sorry.
Okay.
Show us your teacup again, Angela.
This is my teacup that I'm drinking out of tonight, and it's the Lady Carlisle pattern. And I'm drinking out of this tonight because my heroine in The Substitute Bride marries Lord Elliot Carlisle. And so the novella takes you through her being Miss Gwyn Bradbury and then falling in love with Elliot and eventually taking on the name Lady Carlisle. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the inspiration for this novella. I love the Victorian era. I love everything English and Victorian, so mine set in England. And the inspiration for the characters of this novella, Gwyn and Elliot and Cynthia, the other character, it was actually inspired by the biblical story of Leah and Rachel, which some of you might know is the bride swap story in the Bible. Jacob thought he was going to be marrying Rachel, and he worked for her, and then the next day realized he was married to poor Leah, who got switched by her father. And so my version takes that story, puts it in the Victorian era, and I wanted to give it a happier ending because I've never particularly cared for that story in the Bible because it always seems like Leah kind of got the raw end of the deal. You know, she was never wanted, she was never chosen, she was just the substitute, she was the lesser than, and she never really ended up happy. In the Bible you just see her kind of go through this spiral of bitterness and then she just kind of fades away. So I wanted to take that concept of a bride swap and take that concept of someone who thought they were unwanted and lesser than, but then have them get a happy ending. So my main heroine, Gwyn, she's inspired a lot by Leah, and when you read in the Bible, one of the few things we know about Leah is she's described as having weak eyes. I'm not sure if that means that she couldn't see well or if they simply weren't very attractive, but I took that and I spun it as my heroine having spectacles or glasses. And I was really excited about that as a glasses wearer because most main characters that are female, if they have glasses, then usually they're portrayed as not as pretty or not as desirable until they're given some sort of makeover and the glasses are removed, a la Princess Diaries. And so I wanted to have a heroine who is beautiful because of her glasses, with her glasses. They are a part of her, and they're not something that has to be done away with. There's no makeover, and she's not, you know, some lesser character because she has these Victorian spectacles. So that was a really important element to me because I wanted a character that I could relate to. I did a little bit of research about Victorian spectacles, and I actually have some Victorian era spectacles with me. These belonged to my great, great, great grandmother, Laura Ann Barton. She was born in 1852, which means when my novella is set in 1865, she would have been 13 years old. I'm not sure exactly when she acquired these spectacles, but I do know they are pretty consistent with what would have been available to my heroine Gwen about the time she was getting her spectacles. I hope you can see this. I'm going to try to do a close-up. They're very, very tiny. That was common with Victorian spectacles, and they were usually worn more towards the end of the nose and peered down through. And there's little holes on either end of the frame where they would have looped these through some sort of chain or necklace. And depending on the lady, it could have been something very simple, or it could have been something quite elegant if she were a lady of means and fortune. And it would have been only worn when absolutely necessary. If one had to read, or if probably in my great-great-grandmother's case, she would have been quilting or reading instructions in a cookbook. These would not, if you were a lady of fortune, these would not have been worn out and about where gentlemen could see you, because that would have been considered unfashionable. But my grandmother probably would have worn these the majority of the time. I did a little bit more research on my great-great-grandmother Laura, and I found out that she married in 1886, which means when she married she was 34 years old, which at the time would have made her a spinster like my character, Gwendolyn Bradbury. And especially for my grandmother, growing up in the North Carolina mountains, that would have been even more unusual, because most of my other relatives married at 15, 16 years old. So I did as much research as I could, and I couldn't figure out why she married so late. I don't know if she was just a stubborn country lady and didn't want to, or if something happened, perhaps her mother had died and she ended up taking over the duties in the household. But I thought it was quite interesting that my grandmother and Gwen both had spectacles, and they were both spinsters in the Victorian era. So I was quite delighted to find that out after the fact, after I had already written The Substitute Bride. So I'll give you one more look at these spectacles. I wish you could see them in person. They're quite interesting. Now I'd like to tell you some more about my heroine, Gwen Bradbury, the poor spinster who is unwanted and unchosen by the gentlemen in her circle. She's been in the London scene for 7 seasons, which makes her quite ancient at this time. Her bloom has faded, and she is no longer considered on the marriage market. And so as you come into the story, her mother is putting all of the focus on her younger sister, Cynthia, who is more vivacious and more traditionally beautiful because she doesn't have those dreaded spectacles. And so you come in really feeling for Gwen because she's that unwanted character. And I really wanted to take her through the journey of discovering that just because you are different and just because you don't fit a certain mold does not mean that you are lesser than or undesirable. Everyone has their own special, unique kind of beauty. Everyone has their own unique, special talent. And Gwen's talent is that she is a self-taught bookbinder. She loves books. She loves everything to do with them, from the stories that they contain to the craftsmanship of them. She loves the printing process, how they are bound, the different types of binding, all that goes into making a book. And so because she's cast over, she has all this extra time on her hands, and so she has taught herself how to bind and mend books, which was quite interesting for me to research because I also love books. And so as I went through the research process and developing Gwen, the Substitute Bride novella ended up becoming sort of my love letter to books and literature and everything bookwormy and everything to do with the stories of that era and the craftsmanship that went into these books, because in the Victorian era, books were a work of art. Each one was printed one at a time, and then they were individually cut and bound. And the Victorians thought that any book worth owning was worth having custom bound. So they would usually purchase them in the original publisher's cloth or publisher's board, and then they would have them, if they were people of means and fortune, they would have them custom bound in the binding style of their choosing, which would involve different types of leather and different types of materials. And as I researched, I discovered my favorite type of binding. It's called Causeway style, and it's named after a lord, Causeway. And the Causeway style of bookbinding features in the center of the cover, it'll feature a little tiny portrait or painting in the middle that would usually have some sort of embossed or gold detail work around it as like a frame. So it's like a work of art within a work of art. And so I feature a Causeway style book in my characters library, and it was just really fun for me to research, and I hope it's fun for people to read. Another interesting thing I learned about was called deckled edge pages, which is where the book, instead of having a clean line on the edge of the pages, has this rough, uncut looked edge. And I was really pleased when I got our copies of the Lassoed by Marriage Romance collection because it has deckled edge pages, which gives it quite an old-fashioned look and brought to my mind all of the Victorian era books that I had been researching. So I was quite excited to see that, something that I had researched that was still being done today. At one point, the deckled edge pages went out of fashion, and that's when you started seeing more of the clean cut, what we would traditionally see now. But the deckled edge is coming back into fashion as people get reacquainted with things that are old-fashioned and vintage and Victorian. So I was really excited to see that. Some of the other bindings that I learned about were there was one called marbled leather, which is where it sounds like it looks like what it would sound like. It looks like marble, and it's some technique that they did to the leather so that it's got like two different colors running through it, and it's quite beautiful. There's one called calfskin, which is where it just looks like a really beautiful old leather bag or old leather satchel that you would see in probably some of the other stories in the collection that some cowgirl or cowboy would have. And it's just beautifully polished, simple, and elegant. I'm sorry, my throat's dry.
Hence why we have the water.
Yes, that's why we have the water. Another thing that I enjoyed researching for this collection was some of the different authors and books that were available during the era. I featured Jane Austen's novels. Her works would have been published about 200, 150 years earlier, but they would have all been in circulation except I think the last one. So my character Gwen has Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility and Emma, and to her they're like good friends. These are books that she has escaped to since she is ignored and overlooked. And so she really relates to these characters and feels like they're her sisters almost, which is another reflection of myself. I really get into a book when I read it. It's like going to another place, escaping to some place else, like time travel almost, especially with the historical genre. Some of the other books I featured were Silas Marner, Robinson Crusoe, Pilgrim's Progress, which would have been several hundred years old by this time and quite rare. And it was just really fun for me to get to kind of pay homage to some of my favorite authors and, you know, have their books featured in my little book. And there was quite a few authors, though, that I would have loved to include, but their books came out just a little bit later in the period. So, like, Louisa May Alcott's Little Women was just a decade or two too late, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock, which is really associated with the Victorian era, but that didn't come out till the 1890s. And I also love Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell. And while their stories were available at the time, they weren't all available in book format, because Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell, they started getting published by publishing their stories one chapter at a time in newspapers as periodicals. And so every week the newspaper would have another chapter of Oliver Twist or another chapter of Wives and Daughters. And so it would not have been realistic for my heroine Gwen to have a hardbound book copy of those quite yet, even though I would really have loved to have featured them. But I was really excited to get into the mindset of this Victorian lady and see the different things that she would have experienced and gone through and learned. It would have been quite odd for her to have taught herself how to bind books, because that involves physical labor, it involves getting your hands dirty, it involves hard work, and that is not something that the upper crust Victorian lady would have wanted to do. If you were in the upper classes, you did not want to get your hands dirty, you did not want calluses, you did not want tan skin to show that you had worked outdoors or even sat outside for too long. And so for Gwen to teach herself the art of bookbinding, it was like another level of isolation for her from the society that she was in. But then throughout the story, it ends up becoming the thing that draws her and Elliot closer together, is their mutual love of books and knowledge. And right now, I'd like to read to you a little excerpt from The Substitute Bride. It's a scene of Gwen in the library in her new home of Briarcliff Park with her husband, Lord Elliot Carlisle. But at this point in the story, they are both hurt and wounded and are avoiding each other. So it's just Gwen with her books. And I had a request from Carol and Sue to not spare them my sad British accent. So we'll give it a go. This is from The Substitute Bride. Gwyn stopped before one of the rolling wrought-iron ladders, attached on tracks to access the bookcase's higher shelves. She lifted her skirt and climbed to the second step. How she would love to give one great push and go flying across the room. Yet she dare not indulge such silliness. This house was not her own, and she'd yet to learn its regulations. Leaning forward against the ladder, Gwyn focused on the books at eye level. The majority of Lord Carlisle's collection consisted of various scientific texts, but a few fictional works could be found among them. On this particular shelf, a brass deer figurine with jade eyes watched over The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, and The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, the latter of which appeared to be a first edition from 1678 in its original publisher's cloth. How rare to find a copy that had not been rebound in leather by the owner. She reached toward Pilgrim but hesitated. Better not disturb such a valuable book.
That was awesome. I have everybody else muted so it won't reverberate, so I apologize that you couldn't hear them applauding.
Oh, okay.
Do you share?
I'm ready for questions and answers if they have them for me.
Okay, I'm going to move over to present Carol's group to everyone. And Sue and Carol, I had to mute you all during that to make sure I was getting the right sound taken out when we had more viewers come. So I need you to come up to your computer real quick and unmute your microphone. And it's up at the top, and for viewers as well, if you ever need to mute or unmute, you can slide your mouse up to the top, and there is a microphone there, and you can click that microphone to unmute. All right. Are you there? There we go.
Yes, I think we are. Can you hear us?
I can.
I can.
So
Okay.
go ahead with any questions that you have for Angela, and I have the camera on you guys so Angela can see you as you ask questions.
So does anyone have a question that they would like to ask Angela? Carol, this is a Carol also that's going to ask.
Hi.
Speak loudly.
Okay, hi. I always get very into the characters of a story, so I always wonder. I want to know what happened. Like, they stay in my head, and I want to know like what happened. Did they have kids? Did they? So I wonder if it's the same for you. And what you would say would happen to the two of them in their marriage.
Yes, I always wonder what happens when a story ends, because most authors they give you enough closure so that the story can end, but then there's always well, what happened 5 years from now, or what happened 10 years from now? Did they have kids? So I'm exactly like you. I feel the same way. And I'll even, if I read a book where I don't approve of the ending, then in my head I will imagine a happier ending for them, that later on down the road it all worked out just fine. So, because I'm a happy ending girl. I don't like to see sad stories. I don't mind if a story starts off sad or starts off with conflict, but I really like to see some hope and some happiness by the end for the characters, especially if I've really come to love them. So yes, I would imagine that Gwyn and Elliot have a very happy ending, that they fall deeper in love, and they probably have quite a few little Gwyns and Elliots running around the manor house. So yes. And I would probably like to think that Lord Carlisle's inventions took off and that he finally got the acclaim and the notoriety that he so wanted, and that Gwyn would get her book published, because Gwyn is a writer as well as being a bookbinder. So I'd like to imagine good things for them.
I'd like to see if I can unmute Tom's group really quick, and any of them.
Yeah. Can you hear us okay? Are you there?
We can. We see TV in the background.
Oh, it's in the window of the conference room. That's cute. Well, I wondered, we came in a few minutes behind, so you may have explained this already, but your hat, I wondered if where that came from.
1 second. And I'll switch over.
Great.
And I'm going to mute you.
I have not explained the hat yet. This is my Victorian style hat. This would have been in the style of a Victorian lady's riding hat to go horseback riding, but not the sort of riding that you would do in the countryside, not serious riding. This would be for going to Hyde Park in London to see and be seen by the important and wealthy people. This is a get noticed in the park hat. And I acquired this hat through a shop on Etsy called Ms. Purdy's Hats. I had to custom order this because it's hard to find Victorian hats like this at Target.
That makes sense. Carol's group, what other questions have you come up with? You may need to unmute yourself again for some reason. There you go.
Anybody? Carmen?
What was the reason Mrs. Nesbitt kept putting strings on her finger? Was it just to remember, or was there a reason for that?
Mrs. Nesbitt ties various colored strings to her fingers to remember things. This was me trying to find a way to insert some quirk and some eccentricity into the story. I love eccentric and quirky side characters, and I was pondering how to do something unique and different. And the thought popped into my head of, you know, sometimes people will say tie a string so you don't forget. You can tug the string and remember. And so I thought, well, Mrs. Nesbitt's going to do that, but she's going to take it to the extreme, and she will have a color-coded system in her head that only she knows of which color should, denotes the importance of remembering a thing. And so, yeah, that was just a little fun thing for me to write. And I'm sure if I delved more into her backstory, there would probably be a deeper reason behind that. My sisters have actually requested that I give Mrs. Nesbitt's backstory, and was she ever in love, and you know, what was the reason behind the tying of the strings? So that would be fun to do, but I don't know if it'll happen.
I have to tell you, I thought it was really funny when Mrs. Nesbitt tied a string around Elliot's finger. That just cracked me up. Carol's group, do you have any other questions?
Okay, Susan?
Hi. How long does it take for you to put a story together? You know, does it take months in the making, or do you work on it and do something else and go back to working on it? What is your process?
It has varied from project to project. I've never written something the same way twice. This particular book, this particular novella, didn't take quite as long because it's so short. And the idea for it actually came quite quickly. My agent sent me an email saying, Barbara wants to do this collection and I'd really love for you to submit, and I need the synopsis and a sample chapter in 4 days. So that was really, really fast for me. I'd never put together an entire story idea that quickly. And so but it came together with a couple long nights, and it came together quite quickly. But usually with full-length novel, it takes a lot longer to develop the characters because you have more backstory to work with, you have more room to flesh them out over the course of the book. But with this novella, it took the 4 days to do the proposal, and then writing the first draft took about, I think, 2 or 3 months, and then like a month of editing before I finally sent it off, which is sounds really fast, but it's because it's very, very short. My full-length novels have taken a lot longer to pull together.
I have another question. You talked about a little more about Gwen's family, but not a whole lot about Elliot's family, and that Agatha's mentioned, but not really anything else about his family. Can you explain a little more about his family, or isn't there anything else to tell?
I focused more on Gwen because to me she was the heart of this particular story, which is why I started and ended with her point of view, and I did develop her and her family a little bit more than Elliot's family. I do know that Elliot has cousins and aunts and uncles, but since he is lord of the manor, then his father would have to be deceased. And since his mother is not present in the house, she would have to be as well. So I didn't really spend a whole lot of time developing his backstory. It's really hard with a novella because if you have too much backstory, then you run out of room to insert it in just 9 tiny chapters. So I didn't do quite as much backstory development for these characters as I would for a full-length novel. For a full-length novel, I would want a lot more information about the backstory for each character and their families, because you've got all that space to fill, and you can have the main arc and then subplots and then a lot more going on in a full-length novel. But I specifically kept Elliot's backstory simpler because I only had a limited space to work with for this story.
Anybody else? Carmen has another question. Oh, we have another one.
When you were doing your research, when they switched the brides, was that something that was a common practice back then? And how come nobody was really surprised when she turned out to be his wife and not Cynthia?
That would not have been a common practice back then. That was my Leah and Rachel Bible story spinoff. But no, it would not have been common practice for them to switch brides last minute at the altar. But yeah, the reason why no one noticed is because Elliot lived out in the country. He only came to London to find himself a bride, and then once the engagement was settled, he went back to his country manor because he hates London so much and the hustle and bustle and the noise. So he proposes to Cynthia, gets it settled that they're engaged, and then he just sort of leaves Cynthia to plan the wedding with his aunt. And he tells his aunt that he's engaged to a Miss Bradbury, but his aunt has not met which Miss Bradbury at that point. So when Elliot leaves, then the other gentleman that Cynthia ends up marrying with the higher title and more money finally realizes that he wants her, so he shows up and proposes. So suddenly Cynthia has one too many proposals, and of course she wants the one with more money. So that's when she and her mother come up with the scheme of Cynthia taking the richer suitor and shoving Gwen off on the one with less money and fortune. And because Lord Carlisle didn't tell his aunt which Miss Bradbury he was marrying, when she shows up to plan the wedding and Gwen is presented to her, she doesn't know the difference. And Elliot's not there until the wedding. He doesn't like to be in town. He doesn't like London, so he just wants to pacify his family. And so he comes, finds a girl, falls in love, has this whirlwind romance, proposes, and then says, plan the wedding and I'll come back.
We have another question. Dorothy, go ahead.
I was wondering about Harrison Butler. Did he have prior knowledge of Gwen, or was just dispelling knowledge through the ages or wisdom through the ages? Because he really laid the story out for me. I knew that it would come around because Harrison had given such great insight. So did he have prior knowledge of Gwen, or was it just wisdom?
I'm having a hard time hearing this question. Could someone repeat, please?
Can you either speak louder or get closer to the webcam is what has the mic in it?
Oh, okay.
Is there somebody over there?
They can't see you. A little further. I know. I don't think she wants to be seen. There you go.
You're cute.
You don't have to be seen. If someone else could just repeat the question, that will suffice.
There's a long.
I don't know if it was a question or a comment. I was taken by Harrison, the butler, having quite a bit of knowledge. Did he have prior knowledge of Gwen, or was the information he was giving to his master just wisdom of the ages?
I think that was just Harrison's hard-earned wisdom that he's acquired. Harrison, as the butler and the manager of the house in his master's absence, would not have gone to London with Elliot. If Elliot took a servant with him, he probably would have taken his valet to dress him, because the rich upper crust lords and ladies could not dress themselves. So he would have been more likely to take his valet with him if he did take a servant with him. Harrison would have stayed at Briarcliff to run things and manage things in his master's absence. So he would not have met Gwen until she arrived at Briarcliff Park. Any information he was giving to Elliot was a combination of him hearing from Mrs. Nesbit how upset Gwen was, and him kind of discerning the situation, and then his acquired knowledge of how things are done and how things have always been done. He was inspired a little bit by Carson from Downton Abbey.
Got it.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a silly question about one part of the story about how he was sleeping in his workshop. So was he sleeping in his workshop this whole time, or was it just because he was working so hard he would fall asleep on the table? So he talked about putting a cot in there.
Elliot was sleeping in the workshop because the workshop is where he felt the most comfortable, the most peace. Everything makes sense to him in that workshop with his automatons and his tools. And so when he comes back with his substitute bride and his world has kind of been turned upside down, that going to the workshop was like his safe haven, his place to make sense and work through his emotions. And so he didn't start sleeping in the workshop until Gwen arrives, and then the several months that Gwen is there, he ends up working all of the time because that keeps his mind sane and helps him process his emotions. And so because he's extra upset, he ends up working until he falls asleep in the workshop.
I'm going to switch over to Tammy and Tom's group and see if they have any questions. Uh-oh, you're
There we go. There we go. Good. No, we are admiring how real all these characters are, but not. So that's phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
back to this group. Do you ladies have any further questions?
Anybody else? Go ahead.
You referenced the author Silas Marner. Can you hear me? You had referenced the author Silas Marner in there. So my question is, why would Elliot and Silas get along?
Silas Marner is the name of a novel by George Eliot. George Eliot was actually a woman, and she wrote underneath that pseudonym because it made it more proper for a Victorian-era lady to write under a man's name and kind of go under the radar. Silas Marner is an all-around good, honest guy. He takes in this little girl, and through the whole story, different things come up against Silas, but he always maintains his integrity, and he always does the right thing. He's a really kind of underrated hero in literature. You don't really hear as much about Silas Marner, but it's one that when I read it as a teenager, I really loved him just because he's so kind-hearted and has so much integrity. And so, yeah, I thought when I was writing it, I thought Lord Carlisle would like him because he's not one of the phony upper crust Englishmen that say one thing and mean another and have a lot of money but don't necessarily have a lot of integrity. Silas Marner might be poor, but has a heart of gold. So that's why I thought Eliot would like him.
I did have a detailed question just about, in the first chapter, like the first line, I think, it said something about Glen's veil was Brussels lace. Can you describe what Brussels lace would be?
I can to the best of my ability. I did not research it in depth. I was researching different Victorian era wedding trends of, you know, what she might have worn, what her bouquet might have been, and different things. And in a lot of the Victorian wedding dresses I was looking at online, there was several mentions of either the veil or detailing on the dress being made from Brussels lace. And from what little I read, it's a very, very intricate, very delicate handmade lace. But other than that, I didn't do a whole lot of research about it. Other than that, it seemed to be very popular at the Victorian era because it was in a lot of the gowns that I found in my research. Another interesting thing that I found out as far as a Victorian era wedding trend was that Queen Victoria started the tradition of brides wearing white. A couple royal brides in the past had worn white, but it wasn't really considered a tradition or a must until Queen Victoria wore white in her wedding to her cousin Prince Albert, and then it became this huge trend which turned into a long tradition. And it's kind of funny because at the time that Queen Victoria wore white, everyone thought it was too simple, it was too plain, it was such a bad choice. You know, she didn't look regal enough to be queen, and she should have picked a brighter color. And it's kind of funny that, you know, she was criticized for it at the time, and now it's become this tradition that's lasted even till 2016.
Anybody else?
Yeah, go for it. This isn't about the story, but it's more about you. Growing up, I'm guessing you were a voracious reader. Did you stick to a particular genre? Did you read, you know, all kinds of different books? And how did you know you wanted to be an author? Was it at a young age? Did it come later?
Yes, I have been a voracious reader since I was really little. I was homeschooled through my entire schooling, and so my mom taught me to read, and she really instilled in me a love of good books and literature. And so growing up, books have always been really important to me. I read a wide variety. I'll read pretty much any genre. There's very little that I don't like. So I read everything from sci-fi to fantasy, steampunk, historicals, classic literature. So I've read quite a lot. I was keeping a list of all the different books I had read through high school. I started it, and then I got to like 400, and finally it was just like, I'm just gonna stop because it's too many notebooks. So so I don't know how many books I've read to this date, but as of my 18th birthday, it was up to 400. So yes, reading has always been very important to me, and I think that is part of why I wanted to become an author. I wrote my first book when I was 5 as the Mother's Day present. It had, I think, about 11 words exactly, and illustrations that I drew myself. Very impressive. And stapled together. And I always, for Mother's Day and different holidays, I would either write poetry that was very badly done, or I would write different little stories. And what really anchored me to wanting to become an author was when I was about 15, 16, I started writing short children's stories for my younger siblings and reading aloud to them, and seeing the expressions on their faces when I would read one of my stories to them was just like the most amazing thing to my 15-year-old self. And so I thought then that I wanted to become an author, and I actually attended a writing class and was thinking about it, and talked to the speaker afterwards and told her how I really wanted to become an author and how awesome it was, and I was really excited. And I was basically told that it was too hard, and so I might as well not waste my time because getting into the publishing industry was so difficult. And so at 16 I was devastated by this proclamation, and so I gave up writing for 2 years and kind of wandered as far as what career path to take. And then right before my high school graduation, I met this wonderful lady through my homeschool group, Terry Dawn Smith. Hi, Terry. And I was actually taking her essay class and not doing that well because apparently fiction writing does not translate to essay writing. And I was pulled aside by her after class, and she was talking to me about my dreams, and I mentioned to her kind of off the cuff that I would really love to be a fiction author. And so she graciously offered to read some of my work, and it turned out that she was a member of the American Christian Fiction Writers Association, and so she then started a fiction writing course in my area that I took for 3 years, and things kind of built up from there slowly but surely, of not giving up and working and learning and getting rejected and learning some more. So a little bit of my writing journey.
I'm going to pop in because I relate so much to what you said about somebody trying to steal or kill your dream. And I think that I had a high school English teacher, and she told me that I couldn't write, and the reason she did that was that she did not want juniors in her senior class, which I had tested and made sure I could get into. So she tried to kick me out of her class. And so, yeah. And so after that, she flunked or D- every single paper I turned in. And so I just thought, oh, I've got to tell you that, Angela, because that...
Badly done, teacher. Badly done, indeed.
Yeah. It's amazing what we can do to encourage or discourage someone else in their dream. So my question to you, Angela, is when you when you started finding somebody who gave you the opportunity to learn more about your dream, were you still, and are you still now, sometimes battling that first person's negativity?
I think I've finally let that comment go. I think I finally overcome it as I've had various other people affirm that, yes, a writing career is difficult, but it's not impossible. Yes, you can get published, and no, it won't necessarily be the first time you try, but if you keep going, you can. And so I've had different people encourage and uplift me to the point where I've found healing from that one comment, but there's always that voice inside my own head telling me that, you know, it's too hard. It's too hard for you. You specifically do not have the capabilities to do this, and it comes and goes. It's especially come in these last few weeks as I've been preparing for this event. Technology is not my top skill, and so it has been a stretch to adjust to all of the new technology that is now expected and available to authors today. It's not just, you know, we write the book and then we send it off, and then some magical publishing company does all the work for us and then just sends us bucket loads of money.
When that bucket load of money shows up. So one more question from me is, was it worth it to learn how to do this, to learn how to do a Google Hangout?
Yes. It's not been easy, but that doesn't mean it wasn't worth it. Anything that's been really important to me, anything that has involved my writing has involved a learning curve and a level of difficulty and a pushing outside of my comfort zone. But afterwards, I'm a nervous wreck up until the point, but then afterwards I'm always glad I did it. I mean, whether it was entering my first writing contest and I thought I was going to have a panic attack waiting for the judges to call, or when I sent off queries to agents and editors for the first time and got my first few rejections, or even sending off a chapter for critique and not knowing what kind of response you're going to get, what kind of feedback you're going to get. So it's been, the writing process has been different levels of overcoming fear and acquiring new skills. But yes, it was so worth it.
If I could point something out, not just for Angela's sake, but for our viewers online and for our lovely attendees that are in both Tammy's and Tommy's event over there and at the Vine in Dyer, Indiana. One of the things that I've noticed is that an author's work life really does parallel everybody's work life out there. There's hard things to learn, there's new things to learn, and there's opportunity and just amazing things out there for everyone. And there's fear along the way in every job. There's things you don't like in every job. But I just want to congratulate you, Angela, for being someone who was willing to be there, learning and going through what it took. I just want to congratulate you all over at the Vine for bringing all of your people together when it is, what is it, -2 over there? Woohoo! -2, and you guys are, whoa, I can't imagine. You braved the weather to come out, and it's so incredible. And I can't wait to see how much more the group is going to continue to grow. And I want to thank you all over at Tom and Tammy's area for being with us today and for saying hi. It's amazing to have our CBA representatives there with us. So thank you so much. And right now, I think unless I'm going to take it back over to Angela, do you have any closing comments that you would like to present?
In closing, I'd just like to thank Carol and Sue and everyone at the bookstore who came. I cannot imagine that level of cold. So just thank you so much for coming. Thank you for hanging out with me and braving my fake British accent and having patience with me freezing up in the middle of my talk. I'm just so grateful for everyone there and thankful for everyone who's read The Substitute Bride, and just thank you guys so much for allowing me this opportunity.
Folks, what we're going to do is turn it back over to Sue and Carol's group over at the Vine, and you folks can either keep us on, or if you want to stop now and go to your own small group of talking about the novella and the book. What I do want to do is make sure everybody knows how to find the event for next week. And I'm going to each week make sure that you get the link to join if you're online. And so here is the link in the sidebar. And I'll send it by email over to the group over at the Vine, and we'll make sure that it's out there online and all over the place so that you have the opportunity to be a part of it again and growing the group into the future. So thank you for letting us be part of it. And so Carol and Sue, what would you like to do now?
Carol has one more question.
I missed
So she has
Go ahead.
Actually, Angela, we loved your novella, and so we were wondering, can you give us an idea of some of your other books? Because I know there's a few of us that would love to read some more of your work.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad you guys enjoyed it. That means a lot to me. This was actually my first publication. So at the moment, this is the only one I have available. However, I am going to be a part of a second Barber novella collection that comes out this August. It's called the California Gold Rush Romance Collection, and mine is again set primarily in England. I have one teeny tiny scene in California, and then the rest of it pops back over the pond. So that will be coming out on August 1st.
August 1st, 2016. Okay, and I put it in the sidebar so you guys can copy paste if you need to. And wow, I'm just off the top of my head thinking, I think there might be an opportunity for another hangout.
Our girls are saying, hurry up and write some more, a big book, because we're all eager to read some more of your writing, Angela.
Oh, thank you so much. I have a project that I've been working on off and on the last year. My summer in 2015 was a little crazy and I didn't get to it, but once the marketing for this book settles down a little bit in February, I'm hoping to dive into that, and that will be another Victorian era England jaunt across the pond. So
well, if you can give the Vine a shout out when you're publicating something, we can get the word out to our book club.
Okay, awesome. That would be amazing.
And I just have to say I'm so glad that you didn't listen to your first naysayer.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, ladies, then I believe it's time for us to turn the store back over to you so you can have your own discussion and continue building a relationship within your own book club. And thank you so much for having us and for letting us take part. And we'll continue to market and build for the next one. And I get to be your next author. So I will see you next week. And thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angie.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, Angela.
Bye-bye.
Bye.